Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and Stephanie Burke. Good evening, guys. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Spectacular. Did I not? I did. Which one? You're on 4.
I think I'm good.
I can't hear
You
you.
got
at
me.
all.
You got me.
No, I don't hear you at all. Are
No?
you listening? You're listening to the little board, right? Or are you listening?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, we don't have you
we
over
can't
here.
hear you.
Oh, I know. Hey, try it now.
How about that?
There you
Yes,
are.
there you are.
Oh. See what happens when you're back on the radio after
Magic.
weeks of streaming only? You have to actually figure out how to work the buttons. And I have to jack my volume up because I think I'm going deaf.
Well, please don't do that.
That's not going to be good for the
No.
future of the show if that happens.
Probably not.
But it's definitely, I noticed that like all this week when I was in there doing the news, I had to turn things up louder than I normally would have.
You getting like an ear infection or sinus infection or something?
Nope. I think I'm just going deaf.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, worst case scenario. Sounds great.
I mean, if I have to sign the show, I don't know any sign language.
Well, you could probably still talk. You just have to learn how to read lips.
I should make fun. I know for a fact we have a person who's listening that is deaf. So it's because we tried to look into the transcription service, but it didn't work. I mean, it'll work. It just doesn't write what we actually say. It's like
I'm
a bunch
sure.
of jumbled up stuff. But then again, what we talk about is really just a bunch of jumbled up stuff anyway.
Sometimes.
So it's not like it's that much of a difference off what the show would have been. But normally we talk about the paranormal. That's what we're here to talk about each and every Saturday night. And of course, we stream live on SpookySouthCoast.com. You can watch the show as you're listening on WBSM. You can hear us. But if you want to see us, just go to SpookySouthCoast.com or the YouTube app or the free Spooky South Coast app, and you will find the video stream of the show as we go along here. And we've got...
I was gonna say it is closed captioned as well. YouTube does that for us.
Oh, well, that's good of them.
Yeah.
Is it accurate?
It's pretty accurate, yeah. For the most part, a couple of words here and there. But
Are you talking about like on the replay later on or during the live show? Is it closed
it's
captioned as well?
it's after the fact.
Okay, yeah, because I know that it's easier for things to be closed captioned at a later
Afterward.
time.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But because otherwise, how would they know what I'm going to say before I say it?
Uh-huh.
Baby buggy bumpers. Ha! You didn't know I was going to say that, did you?
It's just Stephanie right there.
Oh, my goodness.
Just typing away.
Yeah, that's
Just typing
right.
things
She's
before
like,
you
I'm-
say them.
She's like, I have to use psychic captioning to be able to get all this stuff out there ahead of time. So, well, listen, before we get going with, I kind of want to do a spooky South Coast paranormal year in review.
Okay.
So we're going to go back and we're going to talk about some of the shows that we did this year and some of the topics that we covered and touch upon some of the big stories that hit the paranormal world. And, of course, we welcome anybody to call in with their thoughts on any of the big paranormal topics of 2017. And you can do that at 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. And, of course, in the chat room as well. But, you know, if there's something that popped up this year, it doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be chronologically. We're going to go through the shows chronologically.
Okay.
Because that's how they're all laid out on the screen in front of me. But if you wanted to, you know, talk about something that came up during the course of the year and we haven't gotten to that month or whatever, don't worry about it. Just call in and share. But before we get into that, I'm surprised that I got a lot of people liking a picture that I put up on social media last night. Stephanie, I don't know if you saw this, but
I did.
my son and I are watching Netflix, and for anybody that has Netflix, a great documentary series called Myths and Monsters, where they do it's a documentary, and it's really looking into the stories behind a lot of these mythologies and like the people of the time and how they applied this mythology to them and everything. You know, they kind of get into why, like for example, there's an episode on the wilderness and about the magical power of the wilderness. But why would they consider the woods to be a magical place? Well, because, you know, there's beyond the civilization that was there at the time. You know, all these things getting into the backstory of it. But it also has some narrative storytelling elements as well, too. They tell you a lot of the legends as you're learning about them. And they always have like one centralized legend that is a story that carries out through the whole episode. So it's very well done. So as we're sitting there watching last night's episode on the wilderness, the one we were watching last night, they start talking about the Brothers Grimm and about how they would put out these different editions, and they show some other, you know, some of the later editions that they came out with when they would revise the stories and what have you. And I turned to my son and I said, you know what's funny is I have, somewhere in this house, I have a book of Grimm's fairy tales that's over 100 years old. And he looked at me like, really? And I said, yeah, I don't remember where I got it, but I brought it home. It's in terrible shape, but I brought it home and I put it somewhere. And if we can just find it, and he's like, I think I know where it is. And so there's a bookshelf in my living room, and it's literally right on top of the bookshelf.
Wow.
And we just had totally forgotten that it was there. And so he pulled it down and he's looking through it, and I'm telling him, like, these are not the Disney versions of these stories.
Yeah.
These are not even what you would find in a modern day Grimm's Fairy Tales book where they sanitize the stories a little bit. These are the original endings where, you know, people die, people get eaten. It's not always, you know, a happy ending to these stories. And so he's like thumbing through and he's fascinated by it. He just got a camera for Christmas.
I did see that.
He got a really nice camera. So he's like taking photos and taking some. So I just snap off a couple of pictures with my phone and post it up, and people are going crazy over this book. It's at least 127 years old.
I remember you saying that. I remember when you got it, but I don't remember where you got it. I want to say it was one of your crazy yard sale finds.
Maybe like a thrift store, or maybe the Salvation Army or something like that. But when you open up the book, there's an inscription that somebody gave it to somebody Christmas of 1890.
Wow.
So it's at least that old. And doing a little bit of research online, it looks like it might have been published in 1890. So there's no publishing date. Some of the pages might be missing. I don't know.
Right.
But
it's still cool to have.
Absolutely. I mean, I have in my basement, I have a whole bookshelf full of books that are like over 100 years old.
Yep.
But just none of them are really anything interesting. You know, some of them are like, I think somewhere down there I have like a manual of like what a housewife should be.
Oh my God.
You know, from like 1910 or something
That's
like
horrible.
that. But I find these books because I used to go to yard sales, and like I don't mess around when I go to a yard sale. Anybody that knows me knows.
This is serious business.
You know, when people are going to yard sales and they're thumbing through a box of records and trying to pick out 4 or 5 records that they want at $1 each, I just look to the person that's running the yard sale and say, how much do you want for the whole box? Because not that I have money to throw around, but I don't want to sit there and, you know, negotiate later when I find 7 records that I want and it's $7 when I could just tell the guy I'll give you 10 for all of the records, you know? So, and I do that a lot with books too, especially if I find boxes of old books, because if you find if you pay $5 for a box of old books and you find one book that's worth keeping or worth reselling, then I have no problem taking the rest of them and going and donating them to a book sale or something. But for some reason, there's a bunch of them that I just never donated. So I got to go down there. Hopefully they didn't get all mildew or anything. It's dry in my basement, but you never know with books, you know? So I'm going to have to go through there and see if there's anything, because I know somewhere I have a copy of The Klansman from 1900, which if anybody's ever seen Birth of a Nation, not the new movie that came out a couple years ago, but the original silent film, I think it was D.W. Griffiths made it. If you've ever seen that movie, that's based on the book The Klansman. And I found a 1900 first edition of that book at the Wareham Historical Society 4th of July Antique Fair. And I think I paid $5 for it.
Wow.
It was just the price that was on the book. So I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I know this is what Birth of a Nation's based on, so I paid $5 for it and took it home and just happened to look it up online, and it was worth like $300.
That's crazy.
So I'm like, well, I kind of feel bad that I got it for $5, but
they were selling it.
They should have known.
Right.
If they wanted to get top dollar, they should have known. So anyway, if you haven't seen that show on Netflix, Myths and Monsters, it's definitely worth checking out. It's not, it's not cheesy. It's very well done. The storyteller, the narrator, the person who's anchoring the whole show, he has some kind of over-the-top dialogue at first, but as you get into the show, you realize it's actually very well written. So not a bad way to spend your day tomorrow if you're looking to spend the day inside and get ready for New Year's Eve, or maybe even have a binge watch for your New Year's Eve marathon. I know you don't watch things that scare you or freak you out, so you probably don't watch the Twilight Zone marathon. Right. What do you do on New Year's Eve?
It depends. I spent
Harry Potter marathon?
No, but I was watching it in the background today while I was writing contracts.
I think isn't one of the networks is doing that, right?
Yeah, it's usually Freeform. But I spent years bartending on New Year's Eve. So when I was finally old enough to go out, I decided I would check out a few parties, the bigger parties around our area. And I decided I'd rather make a whole bunch of money, so I went back to bartending New Year's Eve. But I'm old now, so I just kind of sit at home and relax.
Yeah,
and
I don't want to go out.
Amateur night, as they say.
I've said that for years because it's always horrendous on New Year's Eve, especially if you work behind a bar.
I want to be in my house by like 6 o'clock.
Yep.
So to order Chinese food to get it by midnight.
Oh my God! Right? One year I actually did order Chinese food.
It's insane.
And I broke my rule about leaving the house after 6 because there's a Chinese restaurant close to my house. So I just drove down and they told me on the phone it would be 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So at an hour mark, I left my house, spent the 5 minutes driving down to the Chinese restaurant, sat there for another 2 hours waiting for my order.
Wow.
So I think I got it like 11 o'clock.
That's crazy.
So
that's not even worth it.
Nope. There's something wrong with that.
Something wrong.
Something wrong. Yeah. So I plan on sitting at home and being old and warm because who wants to go out all dressed up in this weather right now? For those of you listening, it's 16 degrees here, and it's supposed to get down to 9, I think, tonight.
Yeah, but that's how it's been all week, and it's going to stay that way till like next Thursday. So
I think the lowest of the week was 2.
There were some days where the wind chill was in the negatives.
Yes, it was quite lovely.
What are you going to do tomorrow night, Matt, to ring in the new year? You'll be asleep.
Yeah, I'll probably. Well, I usually don't go to bed till like 3 or 4 in the morning anyway. But
I can't hang anymore.
No.
Will Sophia be wearing a party hat?
She might be.
She has to. You have to take a picture for her Instagram.
We need her in like 2018 glasses.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I should get some of those because. So, all right, I'm going to tell this story real quick before we move on with actual paranormal discussion. I came in here. So I left the house. It's snowing here tonight. And I had to clear off my car before I could drive here. Bless you. And so
Thank you.
I take my glasses off and I put them in the front of my sweatshirt so that they won't get wet. And then I get in the car. After I've dried off the car, I take my glasses out, put them on. I drive all the way from my house to the newspaper where I work, because I have to pick up the parking pass for the Patriots game tomorrow. And so this is not a short ride. I mean, it's a 20-minute ride from my house, but in the snow. And I was behind 2 sand trucks. And then I was behind a guy who had his hazard lights on the whole time and just drove by every exit. Like, he had no intentions to actually get off the road. He was just going to go 15 miles an hour with his hazards on the whole time.
A lot of people were doing that tonight.
So, but I think he had a problem. Like, I don't think he was just slow driving because we were slow driving anyway.
Yep.
So you didn't need your hazards on when we're going 20 miles an hour anyway because we're stuck behind the sander trucks. But anyway, so I get all the way to the newspaper. I go in there. I'm talking to the editor, picking up the pass, all this. I leave. I get in the car. I drive here to the station. I'm sitting here talking to Matt, and I'm like, it's weird because like one of my glasses lenses seems like foggier than the other one. So I take out my microfiber cloth to wipe them up, and then I realize one of my glasses,
no way,
one of the lenses was missing from my glasses that whole time.
Oh my gosh.
So I was like, oh, like it's been like 3 hours now that I've been walking around like this, like talking to people, and nobody noticed.
Just like a crazy person.
Yeah,
yeah.
Like they're like, if you only need one, why don't you just wear a monocle? You know?
Oh my God.
But and then I was like, well, I hope I can find the lens, and it's still in my sweatshirt pocket.
Thank God.
The good thing, I mean, these aren't. I'm looking at the computer, and I'm like, why can't I read? Like, why does the computer look blurry to me? Because these are just a prism. They're not. It's not really like I have vision problems. I have muscular problems. So I was like, well, this is just odd. Maybe the glasses need to be replaced. But
well, I'm glad you found it. I'm glad you figured out the issue, and all is well.
Only me. Mm-hmm. We have a call on the line here. Let's go to the phones. Good evening. You're on Spooky Southcoast. Sure.
Readings and lookings over of this area in particular. What is the best UFO, credible UFO, that you've ever heard of in this area? I'm just curious. I'm going to hang up to listen.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. I would say that, in my opinion, the most credible story that I've heard, you can actually hear the story in the Bridgewater Triangle documentary. There were 2 reporters from Channel 5 that were driving down Route 24. I think it was the late 70s or early 80s. And they were driving through the Bridgewater area and through the Bridgewater Triangle. And they actually saw a UFO that they said was shaped like home plate of a baseball game with lights going all around it. And there's actually I've actually seen multiple newspaper articles from the time from other people who saw the same thing. So Aaron Cadju made and Manny
Right.
Famulari made the Bridgewater Triangle documentary, and they have the two reporters. One of them was Steve Sprasia. I can't remember the other person's name, but they had them recounting what it was that they saw, and they showed the newspaper article, one of the newspaper articles, up on the screen. And I happen to know the writer who wrote that story. I work with him now, so I was asking him about it, and we were talking about the reports that were coming in at the time. So the fact that it was, you have two news reporters. There were multiple police officers, multiple, fire officials. There were people whose opinions you can trust and whose observation skills you can trust, who reported seeing exactly what these two television reporters saw. So to me, that's probably one of the most credible, because there's a lot of people who had their reputations that they had to put on the line
Right.
to share that story. So that one will always stand out to me. I know you're not really into the UFOs, but I'm sure you've heard some of the stories.
I've heard plenty of stories, and people say that there's constant UFO sightings around our area, Southcoast, Massachusetts. I think the most credible story I heard, older story, my dad had witnessed one in Rochester, and had told us about it for years, and this was long before I even got involved in the paranormal, and the internet wasn't really a thing back then. I know my mom's had experiences too. And I think the most recent was the one that I told you about, where my good friend, who is a police officer, had shared with me a call that he had gotten about a sighting, and that another cop who he was friends with actually witnessed. So it and that was very nearby here. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to tell the details or not, so I'll keep it to myself for now.
Yeah,
But
I tried to pursue it for a story,
right.
and we never got any confirmation, so we should probably kind of keep it. But
Yeah.
we can say that this came from very reliable,
Extremely
sources.
reliable.
So
So that was very interesting to me, because the way that I look at all paranormal, it's unexplainable. We don't have anything to really, put it up against to prove what we see. There's no manual on what we experience. So when somebody comes to me and says, I don't know how to describe this, I don't understand what this is, I can't explain it, and they send it to me and it's strange, it was that story was a little mind-boggling for sure.
Matt, what about you? Were there any UFO stories that stand out to you?
In this area?
Yeah.
I know from some of the stories Moniz has said. He said it's like and Stephanie has said, I mean, this whole area is very active. A lot of people attribute that to the army base around here, and we have all these small airports and things, but I mean, it could just be aliens see that this is kind of a landing area.
It's an attractive spot.
Yeah.
Do you remember the night we were on the air? I think it was before Stephanie was part of the show, but there was a UFO sighting on Route 140. And it was like an hour before we come on the air, and people were calling in to report that they had seen this UFO over 140.
Oh, okay.
And we tried calling the airport and seeing if it was anything out of there.
Yep.
They said there wasn't anything out of there. So I think they eventually ended up finding out that it was something like Earth-based.
Mm-hmm.
But still, the fact that there was a sighting and people thought to call in to us, to share it with us, was pretty good. And of course, there's also the Paid Narum UFO flap as well, which in the early 1900s, I think it was like the 1920s, 1930s, when Hetty Green left Round Hill to her son, Edward or Edmund, and he called himself Colonel Green, but he wasn't actually a colonel. But when he started allowing MIT to come and conduct experiments at Round Hill, and they built that, what we used to call the martini glass,
Right.
but they've since taken it down. It was a radio antenna. And then they also had, for those of you who have been to the Museum of Science, they have the lightning show, and they have the Van de Graaff generators inside there that make the lightning. Those used to actually be at Round Hill.
Really?
So that's where they were originally built, and they were conducting the experiments at Round Hill. So all of this activity was drawing in a lot of UFOs. So it would be like on an average night, you could go down to Round Hill and sit there, and you would see these lights in the sky. And we're talking the 1920s, so you're not getting a lot of air traffic activity happening. I think it went into the 1930s and 40s before they eventually just moved the Van de Graaff generators to the Museum of Science. So I think it might have been the 50s even.
How did I not know this story?
I don't know. It was in my book. It was
Shut
in
up,
Coast
was
of
it
the
really?
South Coast. Yeah,
I read that book, so
I'm
I
pretty.
should know.
I'm pretty
It's
sure I
been-
wrote about it in there.
It's been a long time since I read the book.
Sorry, you don't need to go back and read it. It's
A
fine.
really long time.
Once is enough,
Like almost 10 years, right?
I guess. Came out in 2010.
Oh, okay, so yeah.
So-
Well, yeah.
As long as you bought it, I
years.
don't care if you ever read it. As long as you bought it.
I read it
It's
in
in the
like
bargain
24
bin now.
hours. Stop it.
It's in the bargain bin.
It's
if
an
anybody
excellent
wants.
book.
It took you 24 hours to read that?
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
took
maybe
me
not
one
24
dump to
hours.
read it.
stop it.
One dump. I read it cover to
I
cover.
read it a little
Is-
bit at work,
Isn't
and
it
then I
free
went
on-
home and I
is
read
it
it all
free on
night.
Kindle? Is it free?
If you have,
If you have the unlimited?
if you have Kindle Unlimited, most of those History Press Haunted America books are free. So
Do you have a Kindle?
do
Do you have a Kindle?
I don't.
No.
I think I have it on my iPhone or
I
iPad.
don't. Yeah, I don't have a Kindle, but I did have Kindle Unlimited
Oh.
up until I think I canceled it last month. But that's because researching haunted
Mm-hmm.
towns, I found a lot of those little books helpful
Mm-hmm.
for different haunted areas. So that's why I had it, because I'm not going out and buying 100 different
Right.
haunted town books at $20 a piece.
Right.
They're not all in the bargain bin like mine is.
Stop it.
I don't know if it really is. I always say that, but I don't know if it really is.
It's still on the shelf at Barnes & Noble.
But they wouldn't let me sign it.
I thought it was a good book.
Just go in there with a roll of bargain bin stickers and just stick them on. Be like, these are bargain now.
Half
These
price.
are mine.
Half price.
I used to buy a lot of a friend of ours books at bargain prices at Barnes & Noble.
That's the best way to do it.
Hmm.
Save
And I
some
didn't
money.
realize that I would ever become friends with him. So,
Maybe I don't know how it works. I think we get paid the same either way.
yeah, I don't think it matters, but
They pay us so little for books that it doesn't really
Mhm.
matter. All right, well, why don't we do a little bit of a paranormal year in review for the rest of the show? And again,
Okay.
if anybody wants to call in, 508-996-0500, 877-996-1420. So the way I'm going to do this is I want to go back and kind of recap some of the shows that we did, see how much we even remember about. It's always funny when we look back like to something we did 10, 11 months ago and we're like, what was that? I don't even remember
Right.
that. But there were some shows this year that were very memorable. And so I just want to touch on some of the topics that we were covering at those times and see, how we feel about them now this far out later on. And again, if anybody wants to share any ideas or any stories or any topics that came up over the course of the year that we're forgetting, just call and let us know, or let us know in the chat room, because I'm sure it's hard to remember everything that we covered over the course of the year. But,
right.
So if you remember last year, we did a few shows in December of 2016, and then we were off the air for quite a bit
We were.
in January because of the NFL football and college football and all that stuff. But we came back at the end of January, and we had our first in-studio visit from our then Spooky South Coast Week in Weird correspondent, Melody Knapp.
Mm-hmm.
So she came. That was our first show of the year, and I'm just trying to see what some of the topics. So that's when we were talking with Jeff Belanger about the Zombie Prom, which
Yes,
was
that's right.
a very successful fundraiser.
That was funny. That was a fun night.
And we had the best makeup. I mean, John
You know-
Brightman did the best job.
I think we should have won. Well, you did win, didn't you? Weren't
I
you
did.
prom king?
I was Zombie Prom King. I still have the crown at home, covered in fake
I
blood.
almost won prom queen.
Yeah, I don't remember who that was. I don't even know who that was that won.
I don't either because we all dressed ridiculous. But it was a close call. It was a really close call. I think I was runner up.
But it was I actually just got because I started working here right around that time too during the week.
Yep.
And they made a King of the Internet picture for me
Did they
when,
really?
when one of my blogs was the top of the list, and they used the zombie picture.
That's funny.
So they kept using that all year until like last week.
Really?
This past week, Kristen made a new one.
That was a crazy picture. I mean, your makeup was insane.
That was
I think
well. I was also willing to you had some limitations as
I
to what you
did.
were
And
willing to do,
I didn't want my face to look ridiculous.
and I did not have any such.
No, you had
limitations.
fake
My face
blood.
already looks ridiculous. So
Fake blood everywhere. I only had a little bit. I didn't want to be too gross. That will forever be the night that my zombie makeup came off onto poor Len Hunt's sweatshirt. And we somehow got fake blood all over the hood of your car.
Right, and
Remember that?
it stayed on there for quite a while because I
Right.
didn't wash it off. I left
You
it
sent
there
me
on
the picture
purpose.
the next day. Like, did we hit something last night? Or
It did. It really did. Like,
Yeah.
Anybody that saw that would have thought that we probably did a hit and run.
right.
So, but that was a pretty good. That was a pretty good night. And
Yeah.
It was a very successful fundraiser. Raised a lot of money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society.
Yes.
And I
a
don't
great
know.
cause.
I haven't talked to Jeff if he's planning on doing it again yet.
I heard a rumor.
But it would certainly be. I don't know if we can top the makeup.
I don't think I'll ever want to do that.
Oh, I'll totally do it again.
I don't think I can do it again.
But what time did we get home? We got home like 2 a.m.
Yes.
And I had to jump right in the shower. Like,
I
there's
took
no way I was
the
going to bed.
longest shower of my life.
It-
I basically scraped my skin off because we were airbrushed from head to toe with makeup, and I remember like the makeup coming off in these tiny little like dots, and they were everywhere, and I still couldn't get it all off. I found makeup inside of my ears like a week later.
I went into the bathroom at the place where we had the zombie prom, and I
Mm-hmm.
just started peeling off
Yes, because you were peeling mine off too. Remember?
because I had some of the pieces I had to get back to
Yes,
John so we could
I did
reuse
too.
them. So I'm like peeling them off in the bathroom, and by the time I came out, I looked relatively close to normal, but just getting all the airbrush stuff off and the stuff around the ears, I think it might be worth if we do it again and we do it in the same place, it might be worth getting some rooms nearby
Yeah, probably.
just so that we can
We can
wash
scrub
ourselves
faster.
off, clean off.
Right.
Yeah. The longer you spend with that stuff on, the more dried on it gets.
Because it was over an hour drive home for us, so
And plus we had Ken Bones in the back.
we did have Ken Bones in the back. And I remember I sat on top of your jacket that you had gotten that you were going to wear as part of your costume, but you were like, just throw it out. So I sat on top of that so I didn't get any
Right.
fake blood on your brand new car because you had just gotten a new car.
Yep.
And curled up in a ball and hoping that I wasn't going to get makeup everywhere.
It was the because by the time the shirt was all shredded, I was like, this looks too good. I don't want the jacket on.
Nope.
I remember being out in the parking lot of the hotel where John was staying,
Yep.
like dragging my clothes through the dirt, trying to get them all
Yes.
messed up, but the ground was frozen.
That's right.
So like I couldn't really
So
get any
funny.
dirt on it.
Yep.
But it worked out in the end. I still won. So
You did win.
I'm the reigning zombie prom king.
I am not anything.
So then I don't know if you remember, but around that same time, we had an episode with Douglas Robinson talking about the world of vampires that he created, and that was the night where we came in here and we recorded a show during the week, and then we put it up later
Yep.
on, and we ended up having some audio issues with it, so the show doesn't sound all that great. But that was a very strange discussion. This is a guy who created his entire own vampire mythology.
That was a very interesting topic.
Like, it sounded to me like we've talked to a lot of authors who have created their own characters. And obviously, when you create a character, you have some kind of an emotional attachment to that character. Mm-hmm. I got the feeling that this guy was like in love with his main vampire character.
It went so far as him saying that he truly thought that the character he created was actually a vision, and she was walking around out there somewhere, and one day she would reveal herself to him.
It was very strange.
Very strange.
And sometimes you get into these shows and you're like, well, this sounds like it'll be an interesting topic. Mm-hmm. I thought, even though he was an author of a fictional series of books, he said he'd done a lot of research into vampires. So I thought we were going to talk about like vampire legend and lore, and then how he applies that to his characters. But it didn't seem like he'd done a lot of research. It seemed like he'd kind of just come up with his own mythology and didn't really pay attention to some of the historical stuff. So it's a very strange episode.
I have to say that might have been one of the strangest I've ever done.
Oh, we're just getting started.
I know. This is
They-
episode what, 2?
They get weirder. And then, of course, after that, we had Sam Baltrusis on
Yes, we did.
talking about what was the upcoming Provincetown Paracon, which actually took place in May. But we were just trying to get the word out early for people because Provincetown's not easy to get to. So if you're coming from other parts of the country,
Right.
you've got to make some good plans to get to Provincetown.
It's literally the furthest tip of Massachusetts. The complete tip of Cape Cod. Listen, the two... What? What?
I didn't say anything. If we were on YouTube, I would have said something, but we're on the radio, so I got to
God.
behave myself.
Can't trust you
But
guys.
so that's why we were trying to get the word out. But a lot of people have been asking Sam if he was
Yes.
going to be bringing back the Provincetown Paracon, and the answer, I guess, is yes and no, because he announced earlier tonight that he will be holding the Plymouth Paracon.
Yes, the Plymouth Paracon, and I like the way that he described it in his live video tonight, where the ship is sailing from Provincetown to Plymouth, but the correlation between the two is the Pilgrims actually landed in Provincetown first,
right,
and then made their way to Plymouth second. So it's kind of going along the line. So I'm not sure where he's going to continue it from here, if he'll keep it in Plymouth, next year or in the future. But I liked the way that he kind of connected those together.
So you watched the video?
I did see the video.
Did he make any announcements about anybody that's going to be there?
He hinted
that we can reveal here.
No, we can't. We can't reveal anything. He did not let anything out of the bag yet. I mean, you and I may have some inside information already, but he did say that he was hoping that because he was on Haunted Towns last year for the Salem episode, that he was hoping to get Porter and Doogie out. So,
well,
that is all I can say.
We will share more information about that as we can. But let's just say, either way, I'm planning on being in Plymouth that weekend.
Okay.
So, because it's close by to my house anyway, so I might as well go.
Right.
I'd be rude if I didn't. But so that's coming up in September, right? September 21st
to the 23rd.
Okay, so that's something to keep on your paranormal calendars for this year. But and just talking about when we talked to Sam last February about Provincetown, he was very nervous.
Right. It was his first time. Doing a big con.
Not only that, but also you're asking people to come.
Right.
It's like one thing when somebody comes from Minnesota or California or Georgia or whatever, and they land in Boston, but now you've still got another 2 to 3 hours to get to Provincetown.
It's 2 hours for me, at least.
And that's depending on traffic.
You're 20 minutes from my house. So
it's
traffic.
It's 40 miles from my house. 42 miles from my house to Provincetown. It took me almost 2 hours to get there.
I want to say it was 90 something miles from my house. And I don't know how it's only 40 from yours.
I don't know, but we literally in downtown Wareham, we have a sign that says Provincetown, 42 miles.
So it was a long ride for me, but I have taken that ride quite a few times this past summer. People
forget too that it's not like you're riding a highway the whole way. You eventually get to this point where what seems like a highway then turns into a single lane, then turns into a rural back road, then turns into going through 100 sets of lights that are all going to turn red as you're going through them. But
it's still kind of a highway, which is weird.
Yeah, when you get to the point where you're driving through the dunes and it looks like you've hit the end of the world, that's when it's almost like I'm terrified of where I am right now, but thank God I finally
always
made
said
it.
that when you're on that stretch of highway and the sand covers the highway, it's the weirdest thing ever.
But so this year it'll be a lot closer. It'll be a lot easier to get to.
For sure.
Being in Plymouth. But the Provincetown Paracon was a very good time. I mean, we had a lot of fun. We had
it was my first time in Provincetown.
Ever,
apparently. I thought I had been before, but I hadn't.
We had some adventures.
Oh my God, it was so much fun. We had a great time, but I think one of my favorite parts was driving through the streets of Provincetown. And if anybody has never been before, if you're going through Provincetown, you're better off parking and walking because those streets are so narrow and so tiny.
And there's people.
There's people everywhere.
This was May, so the season hadn't even started yet, and there's still people all walking down the street.
But my favorite part was in the middle of the day, just driving down these tiny little streets, and you have to drive slow because there's people everywhere. And there would be, I'd be driving down and a fox would pop up out of the middle of nowhere.
There were a lot of foxes, yes.
Cross the street and just stand there and stare at you like, what are you doing on my street? They were very territorial, but they were really cute. So I enjoyed seeing them everywhere. And they popped up everywhere.
Also standing out in the street and rather territorial with the drag queens, too.
Yes.
Like when we went...
Are you going to tell that story?
When we went to park down for the investigation, there was those drag queens right there. So
yes.
No, we had some interesting times.
It was so much fun.
Including the time that we left the restaurant and I went in the wrong direction.
Oh my God, that was terrifying. You drove down a one-way street the wrong way.
The wrong way. And a cop is just sitting there and he's like, whatever, it happens all the time.
A very, very busy street filled with people, like the most popular street in Provincetown that people walk up and down.
I think that was what the police officer was thinking is he's like, there's way too many people. He can't do any damage.
And that restaurant that we went to with the excellent pizza and ice cream late at night.
Oh, yeah. When I was running into trouble, but for some reason, Greg Newkirk was not.
Right.
Just sitting there, cool as a cucumber.
Greg Newkirk is awesome.
Let's see.
That was so much fun.
So from there, we had our episode. This was an episode that had been a few years in the works. Something that we had been looking to discuss something that we've been trying to get this person on as a guest, and something that we had talked a lot about behind the scenes. But we had Mike McClellan on to talk about his research into the connection between UFOs and owls.
Yes.
And this was an episode that freaked me out and
It
freaked
was
a lot of the
weird.
listeners out. Like, some of our paranormal friends
Yes.
actually like listened to this episode, and it unnerved them.
Right, and they were actually messaging us the entire time that people were, well, while we were live on air, and actually saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. Oh my God, I just experienced that." So, that was, you know what though, as scary as that thought was, it was kind of fascinating.
And I think that it actually helped out a lot of listeners who were wondering about some of their own strange experiences with owls. You know, it had them wondering if maybe there was something paranormal to it, and it was about more than just running into an owl.
Right.
Like, we've all had that happen where we've had an owl that, you know, parks itself in a tree outside of our house, and
Yep.
we hear it for a couple of nights and then it goes away. But it's another thing when you're always having owl experiences and you can't explain it.
Yeah, or consistent owl experiences.
And what's strange about that is ever since we've done that episode, I think the owl that was in the tree outside my house is no longer there. And he'd been there for years.
Do you think he caught on to you?
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was Mike McClellan sending the owl my way,
to make you
like
get
to
him on
remind
air.
me to book him. I was like, you always forget me.
We tried.
You're always like, who should the guest be? Who? And it turns out it should be him. But no, that's a great episode, and it was a great discussion, and it's certainly something that's picking up a lot of traction in the UFO world. You know, Mike's research is really getting picked up by a lot of people, and
As
folks
well
are
it
starting
should.
they're paying more attention to it. So
Right.
we're going to have him back on at some point, because there's probably a lot of follow-up to that. So where did we go from there? Well, then we got into March, and that's when we had our second paranormal potpourri episode of the year, which, for those who don't know, that was the witty title that Matt Costa and I came up with for some of these shows where we just talk about stuff. Where we just
Right.
it was inspired by the old Jeopardy category, where they would just put a bunch of random questions and call it potpourri.
We have fun
Right.
with those though.
Right, because you never know where they're going to go and what we're going to talk
No.
about. But generally,
like last week.
those shows pop up because we either forgot to book a guest, or a guest canceled, or what have you, or there's one or two things that we want to cover, but it's not enough to talk about for a whole show.
Right.
So we kind of just throw it all out there and see what sticks. And so some of these paranormal potpourri episodes have actually been very thought provoking, and some of them have been
All about food.
Yeah, usually about snacks. But
Spooky snack
They're
guys.
usually well received.
they do. People love them.
People actually, you know what? Some of those are our most popular episodes, I think.
And in this one, we were actually talking about things such as spiritualism, the difference between being a medium and being a psychic, and we also had callers call in with some of their own experiences. So,
Right.
I mean, this is like behind the scenes for those who, now it makes sense. If you go back and listen to this episode now it makes sense. But that was when I was working on putting together the Haunted Towns episode
Yes.
from Cape May, where we were researching spiritualism as
Correct.
being kind of the central theme of that episode. And so that's where some of that stuff came into play. And we were actually discussing things and basically talking about things that I was utilizing in the research for the episode.
Correct.
So
But
it
we
was-
couldn't let that on.
Right. It was kind of just throwing things out there and having those discussion points. So a little bit of a,
That's when
behind
you
the
and I were
curtain
going
thing.
back and forth a lot about, old school versus new school
Right.
and what's better, what's not. Can we fit this into the episode? Can this work?
And I took that discussion of that topic on the show and I sent it to the Haunted Towns
Yep.
production team and said, here's some of the things to consider and look at. So that's what we basically used, all of you, the Spooky Southcoast audience, to help create that episode. So
The episode still would have been better with table tipping.
thank you for your help. And so from there, we also had on Seth Breedlove, who's one of our favorite guests to have on all the time from Small
He's
Town
great.
Monsters. And we were talking about the Mothman legend, which was the new documentary that Small Town Monsters had coming out. Seth has just exploded. Like, even since we've had him on earlier this year, he's just everywhere now. He won Cryptozoologist of the Year
That's awesome.
And he has more films in production, more films coming out. The Small Town Monsters brand has become a favorite of people, not only in the paranormal, but people who just love to talk about weird things and love to watch documentaries about weird things. And it's just, it's so great to think back to, when he released his first film and he came on, I think we were one of his first ever interviews.
Right.
And he had been a long time listener, but he had, never thought that he would actually be a guest someday. And now look at him. Now he's so big, we can't even get him to come back.
That's not true.
I'm just kidding. He'll come back whenever we need him to.
It's nice to see people explode like that and great things and success happen for them.
And
especially when they're that passionate.
I don't want to wax nostalgic on this too much because I really don't want to keep tooting our own horn all that much. But we've done a lot with this show over the last, what'll it be, 12 years next month? So we've done a lot with this show in terms of like the reach that we've had. And like, it's kind of funny to look back and think of like who we've inspired, who we've brought together, who we've made connections with and connections to and connections through and all the, it's kind of amazing when you look back at it.
We're like a weird little central hub for some people.
It's almost like we were supposed to do this.
Yeah. Well, 12 years later, we're still here, right?
I mean, it'd be nice if we were supposed to do this and get paid for it, but
cough, cough.
I guess you can't have everything. And then, so from there, then in March we had, this is going to be tough to talk about a little bit, but we had the final appearance on the show of our Gary Patterson before his sudden passing. And so we had him on in March. We were talking about some of the rock and roll legends and curses and just having our usual great discussion with Gary. Now, what's funny about this is that in the course of the discussion, Chris Balzano was co-hosting with us. And in the course of the discussion, we talked with Gary about how, it'd been so long since we'd had him on the show and that we really should have him on more often. And that we started talking about how Chris and Gary and I should all work on some projects together.
Right.
That, we love each other's work. We love each other as people. We should find a way to kind of put it all together and do some things together. And we ended that discussion with, because Gary, was effusive in his praise for us. And it ended with, okay, let's actually do it this time. Let's actually work on this. Let's actually be teaming up on something or other and see if we can get that ball rolling. And of course we said, we'll take a couple of months because we have some things going on, and we'll reconvene in a couple of months and talk about this. And then he passed away while I was on the Strange Escapes cruise. I got a text from Chris Balzano and it said that Gary had passed away. And unfortunately, being out on the ocean, I didn't really have signal.
Right.
Like, it just happened to pop through my phone, like right as we were heading into the Bermuda Triangle. And then it was days before I could actually respond and be like, what happened?
Right.
And so I just remember,
because he was actually supposed to be our guest that week.
Right after
he was coming back on.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a Friday, and it was supposed to be not the day after, but the following Saturday, and it was very shocking to receive that text, and that night I was having a few adult beverages with John Tenney, and we were just kind of sitting back and talking about Gary and some of his work and his research and just about what an awesome guy he was. So that was a show that kind of was, that'll be one that I go back and listen to again and again, because that was back in March 18th. That was his final appearance with us. So going through the year as well. Speaking of people who came back after, Chris did a great job this past year of finding people that hadn't been on the show in a while and getting them to come back.
Yep.
Like, we had Heidi Hollis on, who we hadn't had on since the very first year of the show.
Yeah, it was 10 years, I think, right?
And she had been somebody who was one of our most controversial guests when she first came on, talking about her experiences with alien beings, talking about her experiences with shadow people. And I don't know why it took us so long to bring her back, because as our show was growing and as Spooky Southcoast was kind of, bless you, finding its legs, we
Thank you.
had Heidi also rising up. And she also was building this huge following. And it was just weird that, we're kind of parallel in terms of our growth, but we just never brought her back on. So it was nice to reconnect with her and have her back on.
Agreed.
And of course, we talked about the evolution of the Shadow People from the time she was one of the first people writing about them and talking about them to now it's something that people are experiencing all the time.
Right. It's very common now.
It's funny when we both stop to take a drink at the same
I
time.
know. Sorry. Someone in the chat room just said rebook Commander San Isidro.
I don't know if, first of
don't
all, I
think I
don't even
can
know. I
handle
don't know
that.
if she's still alive, because she was pretty elderly when we had her on. And that was a while ago. And I don't know if, I'm sure she would come back on.
I can't do it.
Even,
I
first
think
of all,
that's where I draw the line.
she's probably forgotten about what happened. Second of all, it's not like she's not making a whole bunch of appearances on other shows, which is part of the reason why I think she's probably not with us anymore. But if she is, she's not making a lot of other appearances, so she'd probably be willing to come on. It's just, it's hard to have her back on when we've already kind of tore holes into everything that she's told us.
The things that we've said over the years. Jim,
Well, no, I wouldn't worry about that. I'd just be more worried about having her come on and telling the same story.
Right.
And we've already poked holes in that story.
Yeah.
So how can we sit and listen to it again if we've already not accepted it the first time?
That brings us to something else Jim just said was bring back Jesus.
That was a
It's
very
the
interesting.
same.
That was 2016, but it was still a very interesting
The
episode.
second coming of Jesus.
That was what was his name? Richard Brown, I think.
I don't remember.
Something like that.
But he claimed he was the reincarnated Jesus, the resurrected Jesus.
Right. Who sells puppies?
Who flashes his money on the internet.
Oh, right.
He's a
Right,
baller.
yep. Yeah, I don't remember the original Jesus being so concerned with money.
No,
I'll
no.
give you, what was it, like $42,000 if you can prove that I'm not Jesus.
Right, just 40. Seems like a random number.
Yeah, it was weird.
Or maybe it was biblical. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably had to do with a psalm that we
We're
don't
probably
know.
all going to hell, so it's fine.
But yeah, that was a very interesting night. And
Right.
then, I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because I don't know. I don't know that you're not the resurrected Jesus. I can't say that for sure. So you can come
We
on
were
and
willing to hear him out.
you can share your reasoning why, and we can have an intelligent discussion about it and see where it goes.
It didn't go intelligent.
It just got weird.
It was very strange.
When he started talking about how certain people were going to follow him and the rest of us were all going to die, or
Oh yeah, certain races and religions and everything else.
Yeah,
and
we're
he
gonna
was
live
gonna
on
exile them to different
hell on
planets
Earth.
or something.
I'm pretty sure he said that Muslims were not allowed in his new kingdom.
Yes, I think so.
So there was that.
That was bizarre.
And then there was the fact that they were going to have a part of Earth that was all for them, and they were going to survive all these trials, and the rest of us were going to die.
You know,
and
I don't get angry often. I was angry at the end of that episode. I was an angry elf, for sure.
I think that the reason why I tried to be nice to him was because I thought if there's even the remote possibility that any of this is true,
I don't think Jesus would piss you off that much.
I want to be allowed in Jesus land. I don't want to go through all that trials.
Jesus. I think that's a place, actually.
Jesus land?
Yeah.
Jesus land.
So that's amusement park?
I think, I'm pretty sure it is. I think it's in Tennessee or something.
Stop it.
We can go if you want.
I mean, I have connections in Tennessee. I could probably call up and ask.
Do they have a crucifixion coaster?
I think they have a Noah's Ark ride, but it's like a log ride, like a flume.
Stop
Yeah.
it. Stop it.
But you have
that
to-
does not exist.
You can't ride it alone. There has to be two
Right.
at all times.
I'm getting on Google right now.
And then the crucifixion coaster where they have
if we weren't going to hell now, now
We're definitely.
you know how they have
For sure.
how they have those roller coasters where you hang down from
Yeah.
and then your feet dangle and everything. These are ones where you hang down but you're on the cross.
Yep.
And so as you go around the loop, everybody's cross goes upside down, and then people have to pray because they're that's the sign of the demon, and then go on. So anyway, do you think they have an exorcism haunted house or something?
Maybe.
Stop it.
That'd be good.
I kind of want to go there now. I just want to see. I know they had Bible Land, but Bible Land closed.
Did it? That's
Yeah,
sad.
Bible Land's one of those like abandoned amusement parks that you can go and I think it might have been like Jimmy Swaggart's place or something. But you can like go down there and explore the abandoned amusement park now.
I can only find articles where it says people were opposing it. So I'm gonna have to shoot out a text.
Do you remember Dreamland, Matt?
Kirby's Dream Island?
No, not the
No.
game.
No, I don't.
Well,
Oh, well, I remember it was a rumor
it was a rumor. It never came
for a
to
long
be.
time. They were supposed to put a theme park around here.
Right, it was going to be
Right.
like in Plymouth,
Right.
like in the Plymouth Wareham area, and like nobody really had an idea of what it was going to be, but it ended up not happening. It didn't get approved. But for the long time, we were always saying like, wait till Dreamland comes in.
Right.
Wait till Dreamland comes in. Well, speaking of Dreamland, we are we're getting closer and closer to being able to go there ourselves. We have 1 hour left in the show, but we're going to take a break because we're on the radio tonight, so we're going to take a break. See, we forget about this.
Right.
So we'll be back with more spooky South Coast following the news coming up in just a few moments here on WBSM.